backside 180 no comply. For this one, as the name suggests, you're combining a backside 180 with a no comply. So essentially you start turning backside, plant your front foot on the ground, and then once you've completed the 180 rotation, you jump back on your board. Some things you should know before learning this one are just being comfortable in general with turning backside, whether that be a body varial or a revert or 180. You just want to have that backside motion down really well. And then this one isn't necessary, but if you know how to do frontside 180 no complies, they're a good way to kind of have the understanding of the fundamentals of a no comply where you're planting your foot on the ground. So there's kind of really only two main parts to this trick. The first one is while you're rolling, you step your front foot off onto the ground, and then with your back foot, you scoop the board around like a 180. And then once everything is together, you sort of just hop back onto your board. For your foot positioning, I like to have my back foot kind of just across the tail, but not too far up onto the edge. It's pretty much across the board, closer into the pocket, kind of by the bolts. And this is mainly a control thing, because if you have your foot way too far on the tip of the tail, then it might just kind of fly away from you. And for my front foot, I kind of put it up closer towards the bolts, maybe covering the first two. And your foot's pretty much just across the board with your toes maybe hanging off a little bit. Eventually you're going to be wanting to take your front foot off and putting it on the toe side of your board. So I just like to kind of put it in a place where it'll be easy to step off. So speaking of which, the first thing you can do is have your feet in that position and practice just stepping your front foot off on your toe side of your board. The main thing here is you're looking for that control where you can slide your front foot off to the ground and have the nose of your board not immediately shoot straight up. And this is where putting your back foot not too far up on the tail comes in handy. So do this motion a few times until you're comfortable, and then we can move on to the next step. So now let's move on to the back foot, which is going to be where all of the control of the rotation of your board comes from. So with your foot in that position, we're going to slowly practice while standing still, trying to get the board to rotate backside. So when you're doing this, it's probably best to step your front foot in front of your board on the toe side, because this is where your foot will be during the trick, and it's kind of easier to get the rotation controlled when you're on this side of the board. So for the actual scoop, it's kind of like doing a shove it, except you're going to want to keep your back foot in contact with the board the entire time. So while pressing down on the tail to give it a little pop, you also give it the little scoop to give it the rotation. You can kind of mess around with this a few times, but if you actually want to start turning your whole body, then you can. And just like a backside 180, it may be helpful to kind of use your shoulders to wind up and then turn into the rotation. So yeah, you can mess around doing these steps standing still, just so you kind of get the feeling for it. Maybe try just landing with one foot at first. But I will say, kind of like some other tricks that we've talked about in the past, just because of the nature of the rotation of this trick, I actually think it's kind of easier to practice while rolling. So from here, you may want to practice those same motions, except you can go really slow and just kind of see if the momentum helps you. So while you're doing this, if you notice that when you're doing the rotation, the board is kind of staying behind and not coming with you, then you'll probably want to start focusing on your upper body and where you're leaning your weight. If when you go to do the 180, you're kind of leaning your body weight too far towards your back, this can kind of cause you to leave your feet behind and leave the board behind. So try to focus a little bit more on keeping your back straight and your body upright, and just make sure that you're not getting too far ahead of your board. Another issue that you may start running into around here is that the board may be scooping way too fast or too slow. Generally, it's really easy to over-rotate this trick, and that may be one of two things. It may be either that you need to be a little bit more gentle with your pop and scoop. When I do this trick, it feels like I'm barely pressing down with my back foot, and the board still always comes around. And then the other thing may just be that your foot's too far on the tip of the tail, like I mentioned earlier. So you can try adjusting where your back foot is and then see how that works out. And then on the other side of things, if you see that the board just kind of isn't really scooping around or popping at all, then it could be that your back foot is just a little bit too far onto the flat part of the board, and you want to do the opposite and move it a little bit more into the pocket towards the end of the tail. So by this point, if you have all the steps down, then you should be rolling, being able to turn backside and scoop the board around, and planting your front foot on the ground. So as one of the final steps, if you wanted to, you don't really have to because this is really stupid and everyone should know how to step on the board. But you could kind of just set your feet up how they would be after completing the 180 rotation with your front foot on the ground, and then kind of pushing off and hopping back onto your board just to kind of see what it feels like. So if you have it all down, then you may want to practice doing it kind of slower where you do the backside 180 and put the foot down and then hop back on your board. But at this point, if you have all the other steps down, then you should be ready to fully put it together. As long as you understand the core concepts between your back foot, your front foot, and your 180 rotation, then from here it should just be little adjustments, whether it's your body weight or how hard you're scooping, until eventually it kind of just comes together and you start landing on the board. And then finally, eventually, it should all come together until you get the 180 backside no comply. So here are a few of my backside 180 no complies. take note of how when I step my front foot off, I'm not letting the tail immediately go down. And I'm also really trying to not scoop the tail around too hard. I just give it enough of a gentle little push so it does a 180. So yeah, I hope that this helps some people learn this trick. For someone like myself who's really terrible at anything backside, it's definitely awkward feeling, and I still look a little weird when I'm getting back onto the board. But just like with most other tricks, it's a lot of fun to do, and I highly recommend it. As always, I'd like to thank my wonderful Patreon pledgers. And I'd like to thank you for watching, and you can like and subscribe if you want.